What's up, boys? This is James Ark, and you may know me as Luck Extreme on Dueling Book from various retro format discords and co-founder of the Ed Edison YouTube channel, now E3 and run by Keegan. Now, I saw a lot of you asking, where did James go? What happened to James? We miss James. What really happened? And, we're not going to talk about any of that today. We're going to talk about BLACKWINGS. Now, it's no secret that BLACKWINGS are one of the best decks in Edison. Everyone knows that. We knew it back in 2010, and they're one of the best performing and most popular decks today. Even though I've dabbled in basically every Edison deck, I seriously have builds of like every popular deck that I've tested pretty extensively, but I've never really touched BLACKWING. It just always seemed like a fragile deck that really wasn't for me. It's like, sure, you see the double Black Whirlwind Shura openings, and they top deck Blizzard and the Sirocco Bora 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 games, but on the flip side, you also die to one bottomless trap bowl, and you have to play Bora, which is like a glorified enraged battle ox, and it just always seemed like a deck that wasn't for me. But that was until this week, where I loaded it for a huge online 1K tournament, and I did pretty well. So you may be wondering what changed. Why BLACKWING? Why for this tournament? Why now? And I just want to talk you guys through my thought process of how I prepared for this tournament and how I ended up on this list, and then we'll pull up the deck. So apologize if this is a little bit long-winded, but I think you guys like stuff like this, so if you want to skip to the list, it'll be at. So first, a word about tournament prep. It's always important to consider who you're going to be playing against, what decks they're going to be playing when you're gearing up for any given event. For this tournament in particular, I didn't have a lot of information to go on. I know it was hosted by ENT Collectibles, which is a great store from the Midwest. They put on a great tournament. Definitely go check them out. And so don't ask me how I know this, but it's just really because I watched a million YouTube Edison deck profiles. But I knew that some tournaments in the Midwest have been won by decks like BLACKWING and Hero Beat. Not super out of the ordinary for Edison, but still some knowledge that I had that the better players in the area might be leaning towards those decks. The other data point was really just a general meta trend of heroes becoming really popular, specifically the Diva Hero Beat variant. It's been doing really, really well in the Beast Mode War League server. I think it's super well-performing deck, 80% win rate, something like that. And the Frog Hero deck also. So just a lot of hero decks have gotten really popular the past 6 months or so. The Base Edison event also just happened at Nationals. Won by my boy Matt Kalenda playing Vayu, so I figured some people would probably net deck him as well. So the decks to beat in my mind were really Diva Hero Beat, BLACKWING is always popular, Vayu just won this thing, and Hero Frog has been gaining in a lot of popularity despite being maybe a little harder to play. So, and of course Edison is just a wide field in general, a lot of decks are viable, so you never really know what you might end up playing. So how does BLACKWING play into all this? It seems crazy to play BLACKWING into a hero-dominated field, right? Back in October, when I kind of built the main structure of the Diva Hero Beat list, I built it really with this specific goal of dominating BLACKWING. And BLACKWING was really popular at the time, so that felt like a good meta call to me. And I won a lot of money matches with that deck. I had really good results, and I definitely know firsthand how good it can be against BLACKWING specifically. You basically just stop all their summons with Gemini Spark and Hero Blast, and Alias is bigger than most of their guys, and Zero kind of closes out the game. So it just seems super free, right? And the answer is sort of. So even though I do think Hero has a generally favorable matchup against BLACKWING, when I would play some matches against really good BLACKWING players, I noticed that they played a little differently. And I'll give you an example. So if you have a Black Whirlwind and Shura, and they have some back rows and a set monster, sure, you could activate the Whirlwind, summon Shura, try to search, and if that connects, you're in a pretty good spot. And that's probably what a lot of people would do. But if you eat a bottomless there, or even an MST, your Whirlwind was just exposed, you lose the Shura, you don't get a search, and now they could just Raikou or Caius it, or use any other piece of removal. It just, you're losing basically your best card in the deck. So I noticed that the better players would do things like hold their Whirlwinds in hand while they baited out all my back rows, or they could set up Icarus plays, and then eventually they would commit the Whirlwind, and if they can stick it for like 2 turns in a row, you're basically always winning that game. So I noticed that there was this other way to play the deck, and suddenly against those players, the matchup that I thought was super free was starting to feel a little closer to like 50-50. And another factor that just led me to this decision was, with Hero getting so popular, I felt like people's side decks have gotten a little softer on Blackwing specifically. Now there's a lot of crossover in side deck choices between Hero and Blackwing. In Edison, basically everyone's sides, like Cyber Dragon, Dust Tornadoes, super common cards, and those cards are really good at handling most aggro matchups with heavy back row. And then, you have your hate for other decks, and you usually have a couple additional slots which are maybe more targeted hate for tough matchups or the popular decks. And lately I've been seeing those as like Prohibition, Super Poly, Puppet Plant, and just like other stuff for Hero because it's gotten so popular. But about a year ago, maybe you saw like Trap Holes, Consecrated Lights, and other stuff for Blackwing. So I felt like the target hate for Blackwing had gone a little bit down in exchange for Hero stuff. And I felt like if all I had to deal with were a couple extra Cyber Dragons and a couple Dust Tornadoes, then I could probably find a way to deal with that. And with that approach in mind, I knew that I could build and play the deck to counter what most people consider Blackwing's biggest weakness. And with their supposed nightmare matchup seeming a little more manageable, Blackwings look pretty good into the field. So with that in mind, that's basically when I decided at the start of the week, I'm going to play Blackwings at this tournament. And I got to work building the deck. And at the end of the day, I like learning new things. I like challenging myself and experimenting with different decks and trying things that maybe people haven't thought of before, coming up with a list that fits me. That's fun for me, and it deepens my understanding of the game in the future if I want to play against Blackwing. Helps me grow as a player. So I would encourage anyone to kind of take that approach too. And I basically started the week and got to work. And the challenge was really make a Blackwing list that doesn't get demolished by Hero and can take advantage of these people's side patterns and still has a good matchup across the board. And I had 1 week. This is where we ended up. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details of the single card swaps back and forth. And that's kind of for my team, Bongo Boys. Shout out to them for putting up with me blabbing out this deck. But this is where I ended up, and I was able to take it to a top 8 finish at this 1K tournament. Now, I know what you're thinking. At first thought, this has been like a lot of preamble for a pretty standard Blackwing list, right? But I think the couple small decisions that I did make were kind of interesting and just worth discussing, so let's get into it. Now, first of all, in the monster lineup, I chose to go with only 2 Bora, and like I touched on before, this just to me seemed like a glorified Enraged Battle Locks. And obviously I'm underselling it a little bit, it does some good stuff, but I found that was mostly useful when I'm comboing with Whirlwind, especially if I go first, to have the 6th big target for that. Or I can combo with the Sirocco, push for a lot of damage. But I mostly see it sort of as a combo card or extender, and just kind of a worse Shura, to make sure that my Blizzard is live, to make sure I have good targets for the Whirlwind, and just, an extender. So when I'm not finding my Whirlwind or able to get my combos going, it's kind of just dead weight. Could definitely see it going 3, but this is what I went with. And then secondly, in the monster lineup, I chose Mistral. And it's an interesting card, Mistral the Silver Shield. It's seen a little bit of play, I think. But so I just decided to give it a try because I hadn't really seemed interesting to me. And after playing the deck a little bit, I actually really like Mistral. I think that 2 little guys, I'll call them, is really useful. That being under 1300 Blackwings that can search off Blizzard, summon with the Whirlwind. And make sure that your Blizzards can always dodge oppressions, and in games that you're not seeing a lot of Shuras or Siroccos, it just makes sure you have continuous, blockers and cards for Icarus, cards for Allure. Gives you more targets in the late game. It gives you more options off Shura, like making a level 6, which could be an Armed Wing and makes the Bayou live. And actually, I found it to combo really well with Mind Control and Brain Control. It's like a better hard draw than Bayou in pretty much every situation because yeah, it's just like gives you follow-up plays and a special Bora next to it and make a synchro. So I was really happy with it, and I think the 1-to-1 ratio is good for people to try if they're already considering 2 value, and it also gives value a search target as a normal summon, which doesn't come up very often, but worth mentioning. And now spell lineup pretty standard. No Book of Moon, just found it kind of weak against value. Could definitely see 1 coming in. It's a nice card, but chose to go 0. Now the trap lineup, we have 3 Dust, and I would almost say that this is the defining feature of the deck, because I've seen a lot of people use 2 Dust and 3 Dust in combination main and side, but I haven't seen a lot of people maining it at 3. And if you just think back to my goals of the deck, which were beating hero, the mirror, value, I think you would immediately see 3 Dust being pretty good against all those decks, because even the value deck, 10FD's list is playing 2 Bottomless, 3 Deep Prison, 1 to 2 Dust Tornado, even 3 sometimes, and even other decks that aren't traditionally maining a ton of traps have started having similar trap lineups, mostly to hedge against hero and Blackwing. Even Frog is maining Roars and Regeki Breaks when they weren't in the past. So sticking with my game plan of clearing their back row, and before I go for my Shuras or Whirlwinds or whatever the case may be, 3 Dust just seemed pretty natural. And honestly, throughout testing, it was really great for me, despite basically everyone I showed the deck to being that's way too much. But I thought it was pretty good, and I really only bricked on it once in the tournament, which was unfortunate, but it was great for me the rest of the time. And it also kind of synergizes with the next tech pick, which was the 2 Legacy Yaliagarasu. And I'm sure if you pay attention, this card has been popping up in all sorts of decks, and it has some unique roles in Blackwing to me. And just like in other decks, it helps you draw into your power plays, in this case Whirlwind, Dark Armed. But in this case, it also creates some nice mind games with the Dust Tornadoes and the Icarus and your other traps. So basically, to summarize, if you ever have a Winged Beast and a set trap, every opponent is going to just tunnel vision playing around your Icarus stacks. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! 101. Even a lower level player would probably figure out a way to do that. So to do that, they might only set 1 back row or set 1 monster at a time and try to bait you out or not get blown out by the Icarus. And if you have a Dust Tornado set, you can end phase it, and then you suddenly have a clear field to just hop off to your Whirlwind plays, whatever. But on the flip side, if they suspect that it might be an Icarus or Dust Tornado set, they might use some of their removal preemptively to make sure they don't get blown out. And if they do that, and you chain the Legacy, you're getting a plus, and that's a pretty big advantage for you. So it's really difficult for a lot of players to navigate through heavy back row plus the Kalutes, plus Starlight Road is also a scary card. So if you ever have a lot of back row, they don't really know if it's Icaruses or Dust Tornadoes or real traps Bottomless Mirror Force or just Starlight Road or fake things or whatever. So I think it creates really good mix-ups and mind games that are hard to deal with. And the reason why Legacy is unique in that is that it's just the lowest committal card, any other card you could set as a bluff, but you risk losing it if they call the bluff and use the removal on it. But with Legacy, you can always use it basically, and it'll help advance your game state while putting pressure on them for their turn. And yeah, sometimes it can be rough going second, but I found it to be a really nice card. And lastly, the side deck. I did actually put a lot of effort into these ratios, even though it came out as a pretty standard looking side deck. I set it pretty heavily for Frogs, given my main was kind of weaker to them with all the Dust Tornadoes and removal. I had Light Mirrors over Skill Drain for a while, but then I realized that Skill Drain can turn off Consecrated Light's continuous effect. I found that to be pretty useful. Compulsory is seeing a lot of play lately, but really useful for Vayu and Zombie. And Soul Taker is just a nice 1-for-1 removal against other aggro matchups. Might need to test that slot a little more, but given I didn't have a lot of other removal, I was pretty specifically metagamed with the main deck. Just kind of a catch-all card seemed pretty good and kills Thunder King, Draco, Consecrated as well. So yeah, that's how I arrived at the list. And despite on the surface seeming kind of standard, I think it's good to come to these pretty standard lists with a set of fresh eyes. When it comes to the tournament, I had a pretty good experience. Right off the bat, round one, I was paired against a player named Sahabi Karadine, I believe is how you pronounce it, which, if you guys don't know, he was actually the world champion in 2014. And I actually had heard that he had been playing a little bit of Edison. I also play some hat format, which I'll probably do some videos on eventually. And I have a lot of respect for him and his lists, and think he's a really strong player. So I was a little bit like, whoa, I hope this doesn't just immediately end in me going 0-1, because he's a really strong player. He was on Hero Frog, but luckily I honestly drew pretty well. I was able to just shut him out. Game 2, Dyna just pretty much did all the work for me. And from there, it was pretty smooth sailing. My one loss in Swiss, I ended up going 5-1 total, was against a Psychic Zombie deck. And he just drew completely insane Game 1, Game 2. I know a lot of people meme about this deck, and it certainly has a lot of OTK potential. I don't know if it can do that consistently, but this guy just drew really good. And he also ended up making top cut. And specifically the last matchup of the day, or of Swiss, was against Blackwing. And I think that matchup specifically kind of showed my deck building and theory in action. My deck was kind of pre-sided for the Blackwing mirror, so despite him drawing a really, really strong game 1, I was still able to take it. And with some good technical play, despite a small misplay at the end of game 2, which may have cost me the match, or may have cost me the game, I was able to take it pretty strongly, and I felt good about that because it really showed kind of my deck building theory worked pretty well. And my overall matchups in Swiss were 2 Hero Frog, the Psychic Zombie deck, 1 like Destiny End Dragoon Hero Fusion deck, and 1 Hero Beat. And in top 8, I played against a guy playing Secret Cat, and that was the end of my run. I bricked pretty hard game 1, game 2, and there really wasn't much I could do. Overall, I'm pretty happy with my result. I spent the week testing a deck I really wasn't familiar with at all, and I made a build that I was pretty happy with and learned kind of a new playstyle, a new dimension of the deck as well. So, will I keep playing Blackwing? Despite having fun with the deck, I still feel a little bit like it's not for me. Maybe if I think the time's right in the metagame. And also, Vayu just won 3 events this weekend, so maybe it is just time to pick back up the crown of the Vayu deck. Or, like I did here, figure out some angle to beat the Vayu deck that I can bring to the next tournament. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video of my deck building and tournament prep process, and I hope you can appreciate how even a deck that people think of as pretty solved and pretty standard, there can be room to explore and innovate. And like, comment, subscribe. I'll put up some more videos similar to this, and I hope you guys enjoy. Peace.